Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a great day. We have a wonderful show planned for you where we have a ton of computer and technology news. Hopefully we can get to a number of stories, and a lot of them, well, if you haven't been paying attention to the news in the past 12, 24 hours, well, my goodness, you are so behind because we have tons and tons, such as, if you've ever, let's see, I think it was like Delta and Sears. There we go. If you've ever patroned one of those two, looks like they had a security breach with hundreds of thousands of credit cards. So, hey, it seems like every other day another company is hacked, and, that's just something that we need to report on. But there's interesting stories, there are business stories, things like that. But hey, that's later on in the program. But in the first part of today's program, we will be talking with our guest, who, Comparitech.com. I believe we've had another rep from Comparitech here on the show, but we are going to be focusing mainly on privacy today here on the program. So just before we get into the interview with Mr. Paul Bischoff, a couple of things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything and anything having to do with today's show. So a link to our guest website, a link to any articles, videos, just anything that we talk about will be in one place. So if you're busy, don't worry, we got you covered. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest brought to you by Logitech, and be sure to check out the live video stream where, you can watch Computer America and not just listen. And that is, of course, brought to you by OWC. All right, so all of that out of the way, why don't we go ahead and just jump right into this just to make sure we have plenty of time. And again, joining us will be Mr. Paul Bischoff. He is a privacy advocate with Comparitech. And Paul, thank you for joining us here on Computer America.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben.
Yeah, so like I said, this is always a relevant topic, privacy, and actually more so with everything happening with Facebook. And, that only affects, 2 billion users. So, we're probably going to be talking to someone who, is affected by this. But you also have some other, Facebook is one part of it. I'm sure we can touch on that. But you also have just general malware. And if I'm reading this right, something called Fake Bank. But before we get to that, give us a little bit of background on yourself. How did you become a privacy advocate? And just kind of where does Paul Bischoff come from?
Sure. So my background is I've basically been a tech reporter or a tech advocate for about 5 years now, reporting about startups, about VPNs, about everything like that. I started off my career in China, actually in Beijing, where, of course, privacy is not so much a thing. There's a lot of intrusion, there's a lot of censorship, and that's sort of how I got into this space. Since then, I've started working for Comparitech, where I write all about privacy, how to protect yourself, giving recommendations, things like that.
Yeah, and very interesting that you actually do come from China. Well, at least your background is, comes from that area, because you're right, privacy isn't so much a thing. And I guess, either advocates like, such as yourself, maybe they're ignored largely, but it seems like privacy is going the opposite way in China, which I know is its whole conversation. But I will say that just yesterday we didn't cover the story that we found about they have like that, it's not like your credit score, but it's like your social score, where, how good of a Chinese citizen are you? And they're rolling that out and spreading that to more and more places, along with facial recognition. I guess before we get started on anything, privacy. Why is privacy important? Because, we see what's happening in China. A lot of people are giving up their private information. Oh, hopefully that didn't just happen.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. So yeah,
I'm still here.
yeah. So as I was saying, we saw what happened in China. A lot of people with Facebook and other social media sites give up their privacy willingly. The idea of what it means to be private isn't so much a thing anymore. Why is privacy important?
Well, I think a lot of people tend to sacrifice their privacy for convenience, but privacy, well, it's as important to you as you want it to be. For me, it's very important. It's really easy to say you have nothing to hide, but honestly, we all have a right to privacy. We have a right to not have other people looking into our business, to not know everything about us, and we sort of forego this right for convenience in a lot of cases. But there are a number of things that people can do with your information, such as identity theft. There's a lot of reasons to keep it secret, just to keep your information private, to avoid being a victim of identity theft or credit card fraud or something like that. It also protects your friends because a lot of the apps you install and the social media networks you use, they not only record your information but your friends' information. So if your friends value their right to privacy, even if you don't, there's a good reason to sort of keep your information as contained as possible.
Makes perfect sense. So here we have a number of questions to ask you, and seems a few, or actually most of them, are dealing with a certain type of malware called fake bank. And honestly, we have not even heard of this on the show. We haven't covered it at all, so we're going to need a bit of background on what fake bank that's tongue twister is, and why. I guess really it's been largely unnoted. Like maybe it's been documented, but just hasn't really grabbed headlines like a couple of the other malwares recently have.
Right. I think the reason you probably haven't heard a lot about fake bank malware is that it's mainly focused in Asia, mainly in Russia and South Korea is where we've seen it, but there's a good chance that we could see it sneaking into the more Western countries soon. A lot of malware starts in Russia, so even though it's not really affected a lot of English-speaking countries yet, it could very well soon. So do you want me to just give a quick explainer on how it works?
Yeah, because if it's not consumer well, it might be. Yeah, just go ahead. Just tell us how it works and kind of how it's spreading.
Sure. So originally, this came out. We first started seeing reports of fake bank malware in January, and originally the main thing it did was people would download an app to manage their SMS, their text messages, and what it would do actually is whenever you use two-factor authentication with your bank. So you go in, you log in from a new computer, and it sends that code to your phone, like a PIN number or something to verify your identity. It would intercept those SMS messages to get that PIN code, and then hackers would go into your bank account and steal your money or do something else nefarious. The latest version, that's mainly the Russian version. The latest version that we've seen in South Korea works a bit differently. It's a lot more sophisticated and malicious. What this does is when you attempt to call your bank, the malware, which is installed through some third-party app or something to manage your SMS, once again, it will intercept the call to your bank and instead redirect your call to a scammer who's impersonating a bank official. And so you end up giving this person all your banking information, and they steal your money. And what it also does is, because it calls a different number, it masks your screen so that with a screenshot basically that says you're calling your bank, when in reality you're calling a scammer.
That does sound pretty sophisticated because I guess it's that sounds a little bit more complicated than just a keylogger or some simple piece of script that's going out there. Who do you think, or who do experts think is really kind of developing this? Is this we've heard a lot lately about state-sponsored, and I think that North Korea was actually blamed for a couple of the WannaCry malware. I mean, who are we pointing the finger at? Is this just like a syndicate, or is this someone who developed it and is now selling it to other users? Who stands to gain from this, I guess, is another question.
Well, I think the fake bank malware is sort of out there for people to use. Like a lot of malware, it can be adapted to a lot of like WannaCry can be adapted to a lot of different systems and a lot of different targets. So I don't know if we can point to really one person. Like I said, this did originate in Russia, but there would have to be obviously South Korean people to answer the phone in Korean. So there's probably some sort of syndicate operating this latest version out of South Korea or North Korea, I guess, is also possible,
Right.
but more likely South Korea.
Right. What's the best defense against this? Is this how easy is it or
Can you
hard?
hear me?
Oh yeah. Hi. Can you hear me? Oh. Paul.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you just fine.
Okay.
You sound
Sorry.
good.
Did you catch all that?
Yeah. Caught every bit of it. But all right. So I guess my next question would be, with this, man, I just had it fly out my head. But no, I mean, I got it. Sorry. How hard is this to detect once it's on someone's phone? Because you mentioned screenshots, you mentioned it redirects calls. I guess if the person on the other end is a good enough script reader, then I guess nothing there could maybe kind of tip you off. How easy or hard is this to actually know if you are infected with this?
Well, it's not the easiest thing to detect, but it does sort of have a lot of hallmarks of malware in that it prevents you from uninstalling it. It prevents you from going into certain bank app settings and changing your two-factor authentication settings to get your SMS sent to a different phone number or something like that. It will prevent you from going into your phone settings to delete the app. So behavior like that makes it more difficult to remove if you notice your phone just functioning strangely. Those typical hallmarks of Android malware. Excuse me.
Mhm.
There was a lot of there was a report that I read that says that it will remove itself from your device if you have antivirus installed to prevent detection. So if you have Android antivirus installed, that could be a big help in spotting it and removing it early.
Now, I kind of come from the iPhone ecosystem, so I'm not too well versed in Android. I know that Android and the Android marketplace isn't as strict with with their developers. Now, I guess my question is on iPhone, never even considered really putting antivirus on a smartphone. Is this something that Android users should really kind of sit up and take notice of? Is antivirus on phones something that people should really look into?
Sure. Well, on Android, it's kind of a toss-up. It really depends on where you get your apps. All the apps there were 22 apps that I believe Symantec found that had this malware installed on it. But they were all third-party apps from third-party app stores. They weren't from like Google Play.
Oh,
In other countries, Google Play is not as popular, especially in Russia and China. In China, it's banned. So that malware spreads very easily from those third-party app stores. If you do use third-party apps, I'd say definitely, and you use Android, definitely use antivirus and probably avoid those third-party app stores and APK websites and stuff like that as much as you can. Those are sort of just gold mines for scammers and malware developers.
right.
As far as iOS, iOS is a lot more closed off for your iPhone and things like that. It really only allows you to install things other from. It only allows you to install apps from outside of the App Store if you've jailbroken the device, which is really more for advanced users, anyways. And not most people don't jailbreak their devices anymore. So you're really sort of narrowing down the avenue of attack on iOS so much so that antivirus isn't really necessary. I'm hesitant to say it's not necessary at all, but
Right.
for some people it might be. But for most users, it's not necessary. And as far as we've seen, as far as the fake bank Android malware goes, we have not seen a version of this pop up on iOS yet.
What?
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
excuse me. I'd also just like to note that if you want to protect yourself from this, if you upgrade your Android to the latest version, Android 8.0 Oreo or 8.1, it will prevent that screen overlay from happening. It doesn't allow screen overlays on system apps, including your phone calling app. So you won't see that fake number pop up. You'll see the scammer's number pop up, and then that should alert you to, hey, this is something's going on here.
Right, but I mean, like, even that isn't the easiest thing to detect because, when I make a phone call, I punch in my number, I hit the send button, and I hold it up to my face for the duration of the call. I don't, kind of pull away and say, is that the same number I called? It's
Right.
like even that I can assume wouldn't completely eliminate the effectiveness of this malware. So I mean, you mentioned there were 22 apps. Just kind of a general. Are they games? Are they fake banking apps? I mean, what kind of apps are these people downloading that are riddled with malware?
They tend to be utility apps, like things for better managing your phone storage space or managing your SMS messages, things that are just sort of utilities, not so much games or full-fledged like
Okay.
standalone apps exactly. They tend to like do things on your phone that are supposed to help you be more efficient or what have you. But yeah, they tend to be utility apps.
So I guess those are a little bit easier to because I guess if it was a fake game, then they'd have to actually be game developers and actually put out a game. I guess this way they can put out a little snippet of code that does their malware and I guess kind of looks like maybe it's doing something in the foreground. So, all right,
Right. And these are, yeah, sorry. Well, these are also apps that require permissions to get into your system and clean it up, but that also gives them permission to go in there and put things there that are not supposed to be there.
So I mentioned a ton of stuff about Facebook later on in the program during Computer Technology News. We're going to do some stuff, but I felt as a privacy advocate yourself, that was one thing that has been dominating the news cycle here in the US, which is Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, and the idea of permissions, where largely I think that whole fiasco happened 3-4 years ago and has since been kind of updated. Like they're not going to let you see contacts if you have no reason to see contacts, but a lot of people ignore them, and I guess this is a problem with, with Android phones and iPhones and, apps everywhere. How important is it to look at an app and when it asks you for permission to say, does it really need that? Like, is that still something people should be I guess, skeptical of?
Absolutely. I mean, personally, every time I install an app, I look through the permissions. I disable those that I don't need. That goes for connecting an app or an account to Facebook or installing a native app on my phone. You need to look through the permissions and think critically about, does this app really need this permission to function properly? I recently deleted an app because I thought it took too many permissions. I won't say which one, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's definitely something that I think we need to encourage people of getting in the habit of doing.
Right. So let's say you downloaded it, you feel like you needed something to better manage your contact list, and now you have this malware, kind of installed on your phone. What do you do when you think you've been infected or you have been infected? Do you wipe the phone completely, clean slate? Do you throw it in a box and throw it in the bottom of the ocean? Do you burn the phone? What do you do?
I guess it depends on how good the virus is. If you're talking like a rootkit, something that escalates its privileges on the phone, it can be very difficult to get rid of, even with a factory reset or something like that. A factory reset will typically get the job done. Antivirus for smaller viruses or less, threatening viruses is fine. But and then of course. You can just uninstall the app, but it may leave behind some pieces of code or something. This is talking specifically about Android, so I would say your best bet is probably a factory reset. It really doesn't take that long. Also, your phone will probably get a performance boost because it clears out all the crap on there,
Hmm.
and and you can easily just reinstall all the backed up apps and just deselect the one that you got the virus from.
All right, no, makes perfect sense, and I guess you have to stay vigilant because you mentioned that if you have antivirus on your phone, it deletes itself trying to scan it, get a definition, and send it back. So, and I guess like even if they did, this seems like something that they would tweak just that little bit and get around those definitions altogether. I mean, antivirus and malware and consumer information, cell phone, payment information, blah, blah, blah. Do you see us ever getting the upper hand in the near future on, criminals? Because, hey, there's a lot of money to be made and they're more than happy to go put in the effort to go get you.
I don't foresee cybercrime curtailing anytime in the near future. I think it'll continue to rise, and we have to be more prepared. I think that companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft have been trying their best, to patch quickly and effectively. But there's always going to be leaks. There's always going to be vulnerabilities. I don't think we can always stay one step ahead because, the hackers are going to be out there. There's more of them than there are security people, I would assume, or not that, but they're always actively looking for ways in. And as long as there's new apps and updates coming out, vulnerabilities will arise and they'll be quick to take advantage of it. The number one thing you can do is keep your software updated because anytime that a patch is pushed out, a security update for an app or for an operating system, that it's good that they patch the vulnerability, but there's usually patch notes that explains what vulnerability it patched. Now hackers know because that patch just came out, oh, there's this vulnerability that's going to be on all these people's phones who didn't update, and they'll go after those people.
Yeah, that's we saw that with I think it was Intel, and they're still dealing with the fallout of that, where security researchers came out with a vulnerability, something too preemptively because of that exact situation where you release what's wrong and you inform all parties so that they could fix and patch and things like that. But now, it's everyone who doesn't patch, and there are unfortunately a lot of people who don't, they're now, laid bare for everyone to kind of say, all right, they are now vulnerable to XYZ, and hey, we're going to get them. So it's a rough time. What can, I guess, keeping everything up to date, I guess, these banking kind of things, because a lot of this happened on the banking side, I guess, for maybe banks in South Korea and Russia and, wherever these malware happen to be. I guess there's nothing even like they could do to really assure their customers that, you are talking with the proper, authority, because I guess it never really touches the banks, right? This is all consumer side.
Yeah, that's correct. You may ask the bank a question that only the bank would know, or something like that, but yeah, there's really it completely bypasses the bank in the case of fake bank. So it can be really difficult to tell if you have this Android malware on your phone and you haven't updated, so the overlay pops up, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it once you've reached that point.
Is there anything unique about Fake Bank that maybe we haven't seen from others? Because only a couple times have I heard of malware actually going in and deleting itself. That's kind of a rarity onto itself. The overlay is pretty unique. I mean, is there anything really unique about this, or is it just mixing old tools to get a new kind of threat?
Well, I guess you could say that anytime you develop something in software, you're using other people's software to build your own software. So I guess in a way it's unique to this particular strain of malware that it can overlay the phone and intercept the call. Previous versions couldn't do that, but they do a lot of other typical things. They gather as much information off your phone as they can, such as your account balance and what bank you use, and send it back. But as far as anything really unique that I haven't mentioned yet, I'd say there's nothing else in there really.
Right. So, and we have about 5 minutes left, and I felt like I wanted to, kind of bring up just general uh, businesses and how often and large and in rather large numbers, either the businesses themselves or their customers and payment information or private data. Just in the past couple of weeks, we've seen things like MyFitnessPal. Like I said, we have one about Delta and Sears today that's actually coming out. And there are tons and tons of others. I guess just as a privacy advocate and someone who, obviously keeps an eye on malware, what would, because consumers, keep your phones up to date, keep everything up to date. The companies are going to do their best to, keep you safe and keep you a loyal customer. On the business side of it, what's the best thing they can do? Is this about education? Is this about actually investing money into, security research? How do these companies who seem to be failing left and right protect themselves and by extension protect us, the consumer?
Well, I think the guideline is all of the above. They need to do everything they can to educate their customers, obviously, to inform them of ways to know of what information the bank will ask for and what information a bank won't ask for. In the case of banks, there are certain things that a bank won't ask for over the phone. Or will only do by mail. Definitely don't give anything up through email. Pretty much nobody talks about private or confidential information through email who's worth their salt. As a business, if you have user accounts in a website or something like that, definitely allow two-factor authentication whenever possible. In the case of ThinkBank malware, that sort of goes by the wayside, but in most cases it will help. I would say businesses, you can get it right 100 times. You only have to get it wrong once to lose a whole trove of credit card numbers, right? So it just requires being vigilant, hiring good staff, using the most up-to-date, powerful security software and encryption, and keeping your customers informed of what's up. If you do have a breach, what I've seen a lot of companies do recently is offer credit monitoring services for free to all their customers. I think that's definitely a helpful gesture. It sucks that the breach happened in the first place, but at least you're doing what you can to help.
Right. And it's really unfortunate because I think one of those you mentioned there, which was, hire good staff, sometimes there's something to be said for, spending the least amount of money on contractors who will do it for you. And we've seen, I can't remember the most recent one, but I know that Starbucks stored usernames, passwords, emails, addresses in plain text on a database. Like, a lot of basics seem to be ignored. Do you think this is what you said way back at the beginning, where privacy and security is the antithesis to convenience? Like, do you think it's just easier to not be secure and then you kind of pay for it later?
Well, I don't think any business has an excuse to not encrypt their databases. That's just silly. I mean, it's really not that hard. You can do it for free with some open source software or something like that, or you can pay somebody to do it. If you're a company as big as Starbucks, there's no excuse to have plain text passwords sitting out there. And even if you're a small business, it's important to encrypt. Have redundancy. Require, limit the number of devices who can access this information, et cetera.
Right. So, and I will say that we have about a minute here. So, Paul, I'll go ahead and let you have the last word. What, are you writing articles for Comparitech? What are you up to? And what would you like our listeners to know?
Come check us out at Comparitech.com. Anytime you want to look up information about how to protect your privacy, if you're trying to find a VPN to use or an online backup service, we've got all the recommendations for that. Last word, I would say go into your Facebook settings, go under app settings, and you'll see a list of apps that you've connected to your Facebook account. This is how Cambridge Analytica gets its data. And at the bottom of that page, there'll be a setting to I don't remember the exact wording, but to limit the amount of data that your friends' apps can see about you. This is sort of a hidden setting. It's not in like the privacy menu, it's in the apps menu. Go in there, turn that off. Don't let other people's apps see your profile information. Then Cambridge Analytica can't get at your data, and other firms like it.
And I know that you're probably not on the Facebook's payroll. Just as a security-minded individual, privacy-minded individual, would you recommend people delete Facebook? or is that up to them?
I mean, you know, it's like they say, abstinence is the best way to not get pregnant. I guess if you're, if you really want to protect your privacy, yeah, delete Facebook. You can also just deactivate your account, but your information will still be on there. I would say that for most people, however, they don't want to delete Facebook. You can go in and just turn all the settings down to the absolute minimum that you need to use the service.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Why? Because you can save 45% on packages compared to your high-priced cable bill. Wow. Take those giant scissors out and cut the cable and save with Dish TV. Plus, you get a free DVR upgrade to record your favorite shows and free installation. And with Dish Anywhere, you can watch TV for free on your mobile device. Act fast. You can save hundreds of dollars. Does your cable company do that for you? I don't think so. Get all the best TV programming at your fingertips at a fraction of the price of cable TV. So say adios, arrivederci, goodbye to the high cable bill and save up to 45% on Dish TV packages today. These are limited time offers and can change at any time. Call fast.
800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. That's 800-471-5325.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we are back, and I apologize, we kind of let our guest run straight into the commercial, but essentially what he was saying was, and I'm sure that he could reiterate it, was of course that some of these settings are not intuitive on Facebook, and makes kind of perfect sense that Facebook would want you to share and overshare, and not just overshare, but overshare your friends and family, because hey, data is power, data is money, and they don't want to make it too simple. So with that being said, our guest is actually great to continue over into the next hour with us as we do some computer technology news. So again, I want to thank Mr. Paul Bischoff for continuing on with us, Paul. And yeah, I thought that, you know, because again, privacy advocate, we did have a couple of stories here that we're going to do about Facebook and privacy. So thank you for, you know, continuing on with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just real quick, just to, you know, kind of pick your brain, see where you're at. The European Union recently kind of passed a bunch of legislation, or, you know, put into effect a policy, whatever, I don't know how they call it over there, but essentially they said that the person whose data is relevant to them, so like your data, kind of at the end of the day belongs to you. So you have the right to be forgotten from Google. You have the right to have companies share with you any information they have on you. You have the right to ask them to delete any information they have on you. That's a very, you know, kind of polar opposite kind of thing that we have here in the States, where I guess here in the United States, we have the idea that if a company collects information on you, that's a data point, and they collected it fair and square, they get to keep it no matter what. And you can see where those two ideas start to get, you know, kind of opposite of each other. What do you think about the European Union and what they're doing in regards to privacy? Because, you know, we have a story here that Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg is starting to implement the rules put forth by the EU.
Yeah, so I think what you're when it comes to Mark Zuckerberg, I think what you're mainly referring to is the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR.
Hmm.
That sort of says that if your Facebook data, all your account and profile information, your posts, your photos, if you live, I think this started in Ireland and sort of expanded to the rest of the European Union. If you live in Europe, Facebook has to keep your information in Europe and not in the U.S. There's a lot of things that still have to be figured out with the GDPR, the scope and what all the rules are. But basically, it's going to be a huge thing for a lot of businesses that have to comply with it, and basically how they import and export data between different countries. There's also what you mentioned, Europe's right to be forgotten, which mainly pertains to Google. Let's say you were charged with a crime and a newspaper story came out with it. It turns out you didn't do that crime. You were cleared in court, but that newspaper story is still there and it's hurting your job prospects or something like that. You have a right to ask Google to remove that.
Right. Yeah. All those things and more. And of course, talking, and you're absolutely right. GDPR seems to be coming to the United States. And I guess this is, kind of an easy gimme because Facebook had to comply to this. I think that the European Union made it so that if they didn't do this, and not just in Europe, but anywhere, like anywhere that businesses that do business in Europe, they had to apply it to everywhere. So, what happens over there in the EU does affect us here in the United States. Do you think that this is just kind of an easy gimme for Facebook because, they kind of had to comply, and this is the time when, we're still kind of angry about Cambridge Analytica? Do you think Facebook is doing this because it's the right move, or is it because they have to, or a little bit of both?
I think it's mainly because they have to. The GDPR was proposed quite a while ago, a couple of years ago, and it's been being written up for a couple of years. Cambridge Analytica just happened within the past month or so. So it's definitely not a reaction to the GDPR or Cambridge excuse me, it's not a reaction to Cambridge Analytica that that these regulations are being passed. But however, I think because of Cambridge Analytica, there's now a lot more media coverage and things like that, and the pressure on Facebook to comply is much higher.
Right. It certainly is. I mean, there are, there's of course the massive, delete Facebook campaigns. There's of course renewed interest in these hidden settings. One of which that you mentioned was in the apps instead of the security. I mean, would you like to see Facebook, I guess, kind of get a little bit more transparent, easier to really identify not just what you're sharing, because for the longest time you've shared everything. There really hasn't been any kind of taboo, unless you were under like the age of 13, at which case they can only collect like one thing about you, and that was that you're under 13, and we can't do anything else. Do you think that Facebook, and I say Facebook, I also mean social media, websites, apps on your phone, things like that, do you think they should get a little bit more transparent about what they collect, and people should have a little bit more direct control over what's collected?
I think a lot of apps need to take a privacy-first approach. Facebook, obviously, like you said, wants to collect as much information about you as possible and about your friends and family. But I think more companies will be taking changing sort of the default settings on an app to ones that are more privacy-focused. And if you want to share more, you can change those settings to change more, and not the other to share more, and not the other way around to share less. Because a lot of people don't go check their settings. As far as transparency is concerned, most of the apps and businesses you see out here online do have privacy policies that are fairly easy to read. I encourage people to read them, even though I know they won't do it. But they're not being transparent. It's just that I think people are impatient. They want to install an app and use it. They just click through the permissions, and there has to be a sort of meet in the middle between consumers and companies when it comes to privacy.
Right. Yeah, and can agree more. And one service, whenever conversations like this come up, I always try to point them to a service that I actually kind of use myself and like. While it's not probably a replacement for a lawyer reading over your TOS, but it's a website called tosdr.org. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but it kind of breaks down and gives, a thumbs up, thumbs down, very easy kind of list of what's good, what's bad about a service. And, it'll give you a class A, class B, class C, D, whatever, based on, the permissions that they take, based on their, kind of features of the service. Anyways, it's, I would really like a lot more plain English and, kind of too long didn't, terms of service didn't read, types of apps out there where, hey, an average person could theoretically understand just what they do or just what they're accepting when they hit the accept button.
Right. Well, I think terms of service are especially hard to read, but privacy policies are usually a separate document, and they tend to be a lot more plain English and easier to digest. So what you said, the browser extension, TOSDR, that seems like a positive way to sort of monitor your privacy. But if you don't want to use that, check out the privacy policy. The main three things you're looking for are what information is collected, how it's going to be used, and who it's going to be shared with, and maybe how long it's going to be retained. Some companies keep your data indefinitely. Some will keep it for 30 days or less.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the last point, and then I'll let you go. Again, thank you for staying over. But my last question is this one that I don't know if it makes a good headline and that's why people are using it, or if just general media really doesn't understand it. But I've had it in my head ever since Cambridge Analytica, kind of broke and this kind of thing. While certain permissions were turned on, and that's bad, the information collected by Cambridge Analytica wasn't stolen. It wasn't hacked. Your profiles weren't compromised. It wasn't anything like that.
Correct.
They were essentially given information that you give freely to either Facebook or other apps you did give permission to as well. But really what happened with Cambridge Analytica, nothing illegal happened. It was just Facebook using your data how they said they would. They were going to sell it and they were going to share it for profit. I mean, we have here malicious actors use tools to scrape the data of every single person on Facebook. And, just as the tech side of me, I think, use the tools to scrape data sounds like a, very malicious thing to do. But really, that's just saying, hey, we use Facebook to do what Facebook does, and that's collect data. Are people justified when they say, this is, an invasion of privacy, or isn't this just the service as it was advertised?
I think people expected a little bit too much of Facebook. However, I think Facebook would contend that Cambridge Analytica broke the terms of service for platform developers. So basically, someone who makes an app and connects it to Facebook, anytime you log in through Facebook, and that app or whatever gets added to your Facebook account and stays there indefinitely. So I think that Facebook needs a better enforcement mechanism for when their terms of service are broken. Right now, it's basically just, hey, we're going to kick you off, even though you've already stolen, even though you've already taken all this data,
right,
and used it improperly. Their only enforcement mechanism is to ban a developer from the platform. They may take legal action, but that can take years. There's no way. Facebook basically says, here, you can access all this data. Don't use it the wrong way. But there's no stick, right? There's no way to enforce their platform policy in an immediate way that prevents this from being happen. It's kind of just like an honor system for a lot of this data.
Yeah, I had asked this question on the air before, and it was, was Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook as a whole naive to think that Cambridge Analytica would delete the data that they had collected? Because, as I understand it, like I said earlier, data is money, and for them to say that they collected data, which is I think now at about 90 million profiles, even at like $1 a profile, which is a lot of data points. That's like asking someone to throw $90 million out the window and thank you for doing that for us. Like, that seems a little naive that they'd even assume that they would do that and, actually comply.
Yeah, exactly. And I would also point out that when a developer makes an app and connects it to Facebook, there are something like 40 different permissions that they can choose from that you have to accept. And Facebook reviews 38 out of 40 of those. But among the two that are not sort of reviewed by Facebook staff, you can ask for people's basic profile information, and you don't need Facebook's permission to do that as an app developer on their platform. Now, your basic profile information, it doesn't sound that threatening, but that includes your profile picture, your gender, your school, your workplace, your username, your age, your country, your language. All these things are included in your basic profile information, and developers don't have to have their apps reviewed to get that information by Facebook. And I think that's something that Facebook needs to close down.
Right. And actually, I think the last point that I'm going to ask you about Facebook is there a way out for Facebook? Because has Facebook built a business that is only sustainable using this data vacuuming system, or is there a way that, because, hey, 2 billion users, that's nothing, that's nothing to sneeze at. And I assume that he only wants, more users to come onto the platform. But if people are scared, if people are concerned about what they're actually sharing, that's not going to happen, and the whole house of cards can come crumbling down. What is the way out for Facebook? Is it to be transparent and to be kind of the open marketplace that everyone assumed they would be? It's just, we all have our own little cubbies in what is Facebook? Or does this need to keep happening for Facebook to be Facebook?
Well, I think Facebook has tried to sort of diversify its income streams in the past. Its advertising model is built on this sort of data, and that's where it's getting the most of its revenue from. But it acquired Oculus Rift. It started a marketplace thing where you can sell things to your friend and it takes a commission. It's trying to diversify, but until it really sort of actualizes these other revenue streams, it's going to be really dependent on that data, and I don't know if there is a clear way out for them.
All right, and we'll kind of leave it there. So again, just kind of keep an eye out. Facebook is a great tool. I mean, the amount of friends from high school I've connected with, the amount of family I've talked to in years I haven't. I mean, Facebook is something really special, but there's that other side that we're now really getting a grasp on just how much we're giving up to to have those nice little moments. So I will say once again, Paul, thank you so much for for joining us, and thank you for staying over. Everyone, Paul Bischoff, he writes for Comparitech. We have a link to that in the show notes, and he is a privacy advocate, so be sure to keep an eye out for his articles. And Paul, I think that you are in the right kind of line of work, because hey, it's like I said, there's a new company every other day that is compromised. So hey, this is important work you're doing.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. So there he goes. And yeah, again, you can check out his writings at comparitech.com. So in the meantime, we are going to continue on with computer and technology news. And that is, again, brought to you by OWC. So here we go. All right, and sorry about that. Had to go do something real quick, but we are back, and I think for our first story that we're going to do here is, let's see. So we have tons of news, many of them linked in the show notes if you want to go check them out, but we have time for just a couple, and I think we're going to do this one. So we mentioned it a couple of times. There we go. And Delta and Sears say the data breach exposed hundreds of thousands of credit cards. So if you have flown Delta or you have shopped at Sears, hey, you may want to consider changing out your cards. And this coming to us from The Verge, where Delta and Sears today said that a breach may have leaked the credit card information of hundreds of thousands of customers. And as first reported by Reuters, where the breach occurred through an online support service company which powers both Delta and Sears online chat platforms. That's right. So, Sears said that it was notified of the incident in mid-March and that the incident led to unauthorized access to the credit card information of under 100,000 of its customers. So, they said that they found that the cybersecurity incident affected online customers' payment information of its clients. So, I guess if you have dealt with either of these companies online and you try to pay for things through their services, more specifically 24/7, then you are compromised. Now, the first thing that kind of jumps out at me, is of course the fact that Sears was notified in mid-March. It is currently, as of the time of this reading, April 5th. There we go. So it's been about 3 weeks. Here's the problem. 3 weeks seems like a very good turnaround time for a company that, when you compare it to things like Equifax, or you compare it to Uber, or you compare it to Sonic, Home Depot, any of these others, in some cases took 12, 14, 6 months to actually get out to their customers. Just under a month seems pretty good. But that's still a pretty long time to sit on this information and have 100,000 credit cards up for sale somewhere where they shouldn't be, and the person on the other end of the credit card has no idea that they're even compromised. So, hey, got to kind of call them out on that one there. But they said that the incident happened on or after September 26th and was found and resolved October 12th. So it happened between those dates, but that doesn't mean that, they could have gotten previous customers as well. Personal details related to passport, government identification, security, and SkyMiles information were not impacted, and that was according to Delta. The number 2 U.S. carrier said that while the small subset of customers would have had their information exposed, it cannot be said with certainty if the information was accessed and compromised. Although, again, probably safe to assume yes. So, Sears said that its stores were not compromised and their internal systems were not accessed in the breach. There was no impact on the information of customers using the Sears branded credit card. But again, just to kind of put a cap on it, they used a payment software service provider. And that was 24/7, and 24/7 was the one that got breached and was then exposed. So while Sears and Delta can say, hey, they didn't access our systems, they did still lose, someone they were contracting did lose the information of their customers, which is a horrible thing, which is a bad thing. So there's the big one. That one just happening just a couple of hours ago. All right, so the other story I really wanted to get in here was about the Apple. And not just any kind of Apple, because for so long, for an unbearable amount of time, when we talk Apple, we've talked iPhone, we've talked iPad, we have talked, Apple TV. That's all Apple seemed to be paying attention to. Maybe here and there they throw us a bone with a new, iMac, or the MacBook Air, or we'd get like a new MacBook, but not a lot from their core business, which should be computers. Well, now we're getting some more information, and this coming to us from Engadget, Mr. John Fingus, and Apple will ship its redesigned Mac Pro in 2019. And this is awesome because, hey, I've used Macs in my past. I'm not the biggest fan of Macs, but I do think that they make a heck of a system. And I'm excited. I'm excited that they're getting back into it, and they're, at least going to be pushing something out that doesn't seem to be an afterthought. So they said that, you may want to, consider putting off that money you've earmarked for a new Mac Pro this year, because Apple revealed to TechCrunch that the modular workstation is now slated to ship in 2019 rather than sometime in 2018 as expected. Yeah, so we're getting pushed back. So the company is providing the heads up now so that customers who need the system soon can buy an iMac Pro without worrying that the Mac Pro might be right around the corner. And according to hardware engineer VP Tom Boger, it might be worth the wait, however, as Apple explained. It's shaping the system based on its potential customers. So Apple has created a pro workflow team that helps it optimize its hardware and software based on real production chains, not just abstract goals. The company has hired creatives in 3D animation, music, video editing, and visual effects to have them produce real projects and pinpoint the bottlenecks, whether it's the computer design or an app feature. So that's pretty cool. Actually listening to your customers, that's a good idea. That's a great idea. So they said that this team already helped improve performance on the iMac Pro, but it's also informing the work on the Mac Pro. The company is also listening to outside pros, including companies such as Adobe. To be clear, the pro workflow team just gives a direct, constant interaction. Again, just, hey, this, maybe it's something with the user interface, maybe it's something with the actual hardware, it's hard to move, it's not easy to expand, things like that. I'm sure they're taking it all into consideration. So the push to 2019 isn't going to please creatives who want the headless machine and will have gone 6 years without a significant hardware revision. 6 years! My goodness, they might as well have been out of the computer making sector after 6 years of just doing iterative performance increases. So, and of course, there are still questions as to whether or not Apple will truly address what pros want. Does modularity mean a tower with room for internal expansion? Or will Apple expect pros to attach external GPU enclosures and other outside peripherals? And while it's good to know that Apple is genuinely investing in and responsive to the pro crowd, there is no certainty that the 2019 system will satisfy those who've considered switching to Windows or Linux-based systems to get the features that they want. I think Apple still has a lot of goodwill in those fields when it comes to sound production, music production, video production, art production, things like that. I think they still have a lot of goodwill. All they have to do to capitalize on it is to, actually listen and actually produce something that people would be willing to buy. So will Apple do that? Kind of remains to be seen. Getting pushed back a year, that could either be a good thing or a bad thing. But as the article mentioned, 6 years without any kind of major hardware advancement. It's it's well past time. Certainly well past time. All right, so there's that one. So there's a couple stories. Might get to them later, later on in the week. But let's see if we can pick one more. We have like a minute left that we could do here on the program. And all right, how about this one? Should be quick and easy. Amazon makes a virtual assistant. This is known as the Echo. And I'm trying very hard not to, use the name, but essentially if you do have one of these systems and you do have multiple devices, you can use them as an intercom already, be able to talk to someone through 2 devices. Well, now there's a way to talk to all of your devices simultaneously. And all you have to do is say the name, and you could say phrases such as announce that, or tell everyone, or broadcast, and enter your message. And at that point, your Amazon Echo system becomes, a kind of a speaker. Everything in the house can give the same message at the same time. So if you want to call everyone to dinner, if you want to tell everyone something, hey, it seems like a pretty good way. Definitely a cool feature. Surprised that it wasn't there from the beginning. So everyone, music means that we're done here. Thank you so much for tuning into Computer America. And again, I want to thank our guest, Comparitech.com. for joining us here on the program to talk all about privacy and that malware. So if you missed any part of today's show, please feel free to head on over to wherever podcasts are heard, and you can listen to the Computer America Show in its entirety. Hey, through your iPhone, Google Play Store, through iHeartRadio, through TuneIn, anywhere and everywhere, Computer America is there for you. All right, be sure to tune in tomorrow here on the program as we talk to Atlantic.net. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So everyone, until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.